Billionaire returns after 1 month. What he sees in his maid's daughter makes him break down in tears. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows across the manicured lawn of the Blackwood estate as Marcus Blackwood's black Mercedes pulled through the iron gates. He wasn't supposed to be home for another week. The Singapore merger meetings had concluded early, surprisingly smooth for once. At 35, Marcus had built his tech empire through calculated decisions and impeccable timing, but nothing could have prepared him for what awaited him at home. As the car rounded the fountain in the circular driveway, Marcus noticed something unusual. His fiancée, Victoria Ashford, stood on the front lawn, her designer heels sinking into the grass, her face contorted with rage. But it was the small figure before her that made Marcus lean forward in his seat, his stomach tightening with an emotion he couldn't immediately name. Little Emma Rodriguez, barely 3 years old, was on her hands and knees, her tiny fingers struggling to pick up scattered pieces of trash that dotted the pristine lawn. Her dark curls, usually bouncing with life, hung limply around her tear-stained face. The child wore a stained pink dress that Marcus recognized. It had been fresh and clean just that morning when he'd seen her through his window before leaving for the airport. "I said faster, you little brat." Victoria's voice carried across the lawn, sharp and cold. "This is all your mother's fault for being so incompetent. If she can't do her job properly, then you'll have to make up for it." Marcus felt his blood run cold. He signaled his driver to stop immediately, not bothering to wait for the car to reach the garage. He stepped out, his 6'2" frame casting a shadow as he approached. Neither Victoria nor Emma had noticed his arrival yet. Emma's small hands trembled as she reached for a crumpled paper cup, and Marcus saw something that made his heart clench, a bruise darkening on her tiny forearm. The little girl who had stolen his heart over the past 6 months with her innocent laughter and the way she called him Mr. Mark in her sweet, lisping voice was being treated like a servant. Worse than a servant. What exactly is going on here? Marcus's voice cut through the air like a blade. Victoria spun around, her perfectly made-up face showing a flicker of surprise before smoothing into a practiced smile. "Marcus. Darling, you're home early. I can see exactly what you were doing." Marcus's tone was ice. He walked past Victoria without another glance and knelt beside Emma. The little girl looked up at him with those big brown eyes, now swimming with tears, and his heart shattered into a million pieces. "Mr. Mark," she whispered, her bottom lip trembling. "I'm sorry. I tried to pick up fast, but my hands are too little." Marcus felt something hot and fierce rise in his chest, a protective instinct he'd never experienced before. He gently scooped Emma into his arms, feeling her small body shake with suppressed sobs. "You have nothing to be sorry for, sweetheart. Nothing at all." As he held her, Marcus's mind raced back over the past 6 months. Maria Rodriguez had started working for him shortly after his previous housekeeper retired. She was quiet, hardworking, and had the most beautiful smile he'd ever seen, though he tried not to notice that too much, given his engagement to Victoria. Maria was a single mother, and she'd been nervous about bringing Emma to work, but Marcus had insisted it was fine. The estate was large enough, and honestly, Emma's presence had brought a warmth to the cold, sterile mansion that he hadn't realized was missing. Emma had been shy at first, peeking around corners and hiding behind her mother's legs. But gradually, she'd warmed up to him. She'd started leaving him little drawings under his office door, stick figures holding hands with Emma, Mama, and Mr. Mark, carefully labeled in Maria's handwriting. She'd wait by the window for him to come home from work, pressing her nose against a glass and waving enthusiastically. She'd started calling him her almost daddy, which made his business partners chuckle during video calls when she occasionally wandered into frame. Victoria had never liked it. She'd made snide comments about the help overstepping boundaries and suggested that Maria should find childcare elsewhere. But Marcus had dismissed her concerns, chalking them up to wedding stress. Now, holding this trembling child in his arms, he realized he'd been willfully blind. "Victoria, go inside," Marcus said, his voice deadly calm. "We'll talk later." But Marcus. "Now." Victoria's eyes flashed with anger, but she knew that tone. She turned on her heel and stalked toward the house, her heels clicking aggressively on the stone pathway. Marcus carried Emma toward the staff entrance at the back of the house. "Let's find your mama, okay? I bet she's worried about you." Emma nodded against his shoulder, her tiny fist clutching his shirt. "Mama's hurt, Mr. Mark. Her arm is broken, but Miss Victoria said she had to work anyway. Mama fell down this morning, and all the trash went everywhere, and Miss Victoria got so mad." Each word was another knife to Marcus's heart. He pushed open the door to the staff quarters, a section of the house he rarely visited, and the sight that greeted him made him stop in his tracks. Maria Rodriguez sat at the small table in the staff kitchenette, her left arm cradled awkwardly against her chest, wrapped in what looked like an improvised sling made from a kitchen towel. Her face was pale, almost gray, and sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool air conditioning. She looked up as the door opened, and when she saw Marcus holding Emma, the relief and fear that crossed her face in equal measure made him realize just how bad things had truly gotten in his absence. "Mr. Blackwood," Maria said, trying to stand but swaying dangerously. Marcus quickly set Emma down and moved to steady Maria, guiding her back into the chair. "Don't get up. Please." He pulled out a chair and sat across from her, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Maria had always been so composed, so professional. Now she looked like she might pass out at any moment. "Maria, what happened to your arm? And why wasn't I told about this?" Maria's dark eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back stubbornly. "I fell 2 days ago, Mr. Blackwood. Down the service stairs. I think it's broken. But Miss Ashford said that if I took time off or went to the hospital, I would lose my position. She said you'd fire me for being unreliable." Her voice cracked. "I can't lose this job, sir. Emma and we have nowhere else to go. My family is in Texas, and I can't afford to move back there. This job provides housing and Emma's health care." "Mama, don't cry," Emma whispered, climbing into her mother's lap carefully, avoiding the injured arm. "Mr. Mark is here now. He'll make it better. He always makes things better." Marcus felt a burning rage building inside him, but he kept his voice gentle. "Maria, look at me." When she did, he continued, "I would never fire you for being injured on the job. Never. And Victoria had absolutely no authority to tell you anything of the sort. You should have called me immediately." "Miss Ashford took my phone," Maria admitted quietly. "She said I was spending too much time on it, that it was unprofessional. I tried to use the house phone to call you in Singapore, but she caught me," she said. Maria paused, her good hand trembling as she stroked Emma's hair. "She said that if I bothered you on your business trip with trivial matters, she'd make sure Emma and I were out on the street by the time you returned." Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He paced the small kitchenette, his hands clenched into fists. He'd left Victoria in charge of household matters while he was away, trusting her to handle things. He'd been a fool. A blind, arrogant fool who'd been so wrapped up in merger agreements and stock options that he'd failed to see what was happening in his own home. "How bad is the pain?" he asked, forcing himself to focus on the immediate problem. "It's manageable," Maria lied, but the way she swayed slightly in her chair betrayed her. "You're dizzy. When did you last eat?" Maria was quiet for a moment. "Yesterday morning, I think. Miss Ashford said the kitchen was being reorganized and that I shouldn't. I had crackers in my room. I gave most of them to Emma." Marcus pulled out his phone, his jaw clenched so tightly it ached. He dialed his personal physician, Dr. Sarah Chen, who'd been his family's doctor for over a decade. She answered on the second ring. "Dr. Chen, I need you at my house immediately. I have a patient, broken arm, untreated for 2 days, showing signs of dizziness and likely dehydration. Can you come now?" He paused, listening. "No, not me. One of my staff members." "Yes, it's an emergency. Thank you." He ended the call and turned back to Maria. "Dr. Chin will be here in 20 minutes. She's going to examine you properly and take you to the hospital for x-rays and whatever else you need. I'll cover everything. It's going to be billed as a workplace injury, which it is." Mr. Blackwood, I can't. You can and you will. His tone left no room for argument. Maria, what happened here while I was gone? It's unacceptable, and it's my fault for not being more vigilant. I'm going to make this right. Emma looked up at him with those trusting eyes. Are you going to fix Mama's arm, Mr. Mark? Marcus knelt beside them, his hand gentle on Emma's small back. Yes, sweetheart. I'm going to make sure your mama gets all the help she needs. And then I'm going to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. Over the next 20 minutes, while they waited for Dr. Chin, Marcus learned the full extent of Victoria's cruelty. It hadn't started with the broken arm. It had been building for weeks, little comments that became demands, demands that became threats. Victoria had been systematically isolating Maria, making her work longer hours, criticizing everything she did. She'd forbidden Emma from playing in most areas of the house, confining the toddler to the small staff quarters. When Maria's sister had called from Texas with a family emergency last week, Victoria had refused to let Maria take the call, saying it was work hours. The broken arm had been the final escalation. Maria had been carrying a heavy box of supplies down the narrow service stairs, stairs that Victoria had insisted be waxed that morning despite Maria's protests that it made them dangerously slippery. Maria had lost her footing, tumbled down half a flight, and landed hard on her left arm. The sound of the bone breaking had been audible, but when Maria had cried out for help, Victoria had appeared at the top of the stairs and coldly informed her that she'd better clean up the mess she'd made before worrying about herself. Marcus listened to all of this with a growing sense of horror and guilt. How had he missed the signs? He'd video called several times from Singapore, but Victoria had always been alone in frame, assuring him everything was running smoothly. He'd been so focused on his business deal that he hadn't thought to ask to see Maria or Emma, hadn't noticed when Emma's usual cheery interruptions to his calls had stopped. Dr. Chin arrived exactly 20 minutes later, a brisk, efficient woman in her 50s with kind eyes and no-nonsense manner. She took one look at Maria's arm and her pallid complexion and immediately got to work. This needs immediate attention, Dr. Chin said after a brief examination. The bone is definitely broken. I can feel the displacement. You're also showing signs of shock and dehydration. We need to get you to the hospital now for proper treatment. She looked at Marcus with a sternness that reminded him of being scolded as a child. 2 days? Marcus, this could have been so much worse. If the bone fragments had shifted, if infection had set in. I know, Marcus said quietly. Believe me, I know. The ride to St. Catherine's Hospital was quiet except for Emma's occasional questions from where she sat buckled carefully in the back seat next to her mother. Marcus had insisted on driving them himself, with Dr. Chin in the passenger seat ready to monitor Maria's condition. Victoria had tried to intercept them as they left, but one look at Marcus's face had made her step back. Mr. Mark, will the doctors make Mama sleep? Emma asked, her small voice worried. When my friend Lily had to go to the hospital, they made her sleep, and she said it was scary. Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror, catching Emma's anxious expression. Sometimes doctors need to make people sleep so they can fix what's broken without a hurting. But your mama will wake up, and when she does, you'll be right there. I promise. Will you be there too? The question was so simple, so trusting, that Marcus felt his throat tighten. Yes, sweetheart. I'll be there too. At the hospital, things moved quickly. Dr. Chin had called ahead, and a team was waiting. Maria was whisked away for x-rays, and a nurse led Marcus and Emma to a private waiting room, a courtesy extended due to Marcus's substantial donations to the hospital's children's wing over the years. Emma climbed onto one of the chairs, her little legs dangling, not quite reaching the floor. She was remarkably calm for a 3-year-old in a hospital, and Marcus realized this wasn't her first time here. He remembered Maria mentioning that Emma had been born prematurely and had spent her first weeks of life in the NICU. Are you hungry? Marcus asked, noticing it was well past dinner time. Emma nodded shyly. A little bit. But Mama says we shouldn't ask for things. Your mama is very wise, but right now, I'm asking if you'd like something to eat. That's different. He pulled out his phone and ordered food from a nearby restaurant that delivered. Nothing fancy, just good, simple comfort food. grilled cheese sandwiches, tomato soup, apple slices, and chocolate milk for Emma. For himself, though he had no appetite, he ordered a sandwich just so Emma wouldn't eat alone. While they waited for the food, Emma slipped off her chair and came to stand in front of Marcus. She was so small, barely reaching his knee when he sat. "Mr. Mark, are you mad at Miss Victoria?" It was a perceptive question for such a young child. Marcus chose his words carefully. "I'm disappointed in some choices she made. Sometimes grown-ups make bad decisions that hurt other people, and that's not okay." Emma nodded solemnly, processing this. Then she did something that completely undid Marcus. She climbed into his lap, curled up against his chest, and whispered, "I'm glad you came home. I missed you." Marcus wrapped his arms around her, this tiny person who had somehow become so important to him without his fully realizing it. "I missed you too, Emma. So much." The food arrived, and Marcus helped Emma eat, cutting her sandwich into small pieces and blowing on her soup to cool it. She told him about her week in the disjointed way 3-year-olds do, jumping from topic to topic. She'd found a ladybug in the garden. She'd learned to count to 20. She'd drawn him a picture, but Miss Victoria had torn it up because it was trash. That last detail made Marcus's jaw clench, but he kept his expression neutral for Emma's sake. 2 hours later, Dr. Chin emerged with Maria, whose arm was now properly casted and supported in a real sling. Maria looked exhausted but more alert. They'd given her 4 fluids and pain medication. Dr. Chin explained that the break was clean and would heal well with proper rest, but Maria would need to keep the cast on for at least 6 weeks and do physical therapy afterward. No work for at least 2 weeks, and then only light duties for a month after that, Dr. Chin said firmly. "I'm serious, Maria. If you try to do too much too soon, you could cause permanent damage." Maria's eyes widened with panic. "But I can't. I need to work. Mr. Blackwood, please, I can manage light duties sooner." "You'll do exactly what Dr. Chin says," Marcus interrupted gently but firmly. "And you'll be on full paid medical leave for as long as it takes. Your job isn't going anywhere, Maria. I give you my word." "But Miss Ashford said." "Miss Ashford has no authority in my house anymore. None whatsoever." The coldness in Marcus's voice made Maria's eyes widen. Emma had fallen asleep in one of the waiting room chairs, exhausted from the stress of the day. Marcus carefully lifted her into his arms, and she instinctively curled against his shoulder, her thumb finding its way to her mouth, something Maria had mentioned she only did when very tired or upset. They returned to the estate, close to midnight. Marcus carried Emma while guiding Maria, who was groggy from pain medication. He took them not to the staff quarters, but to one of the guest suites on the 2nd floor of the main house, a beautiful room with an attached bathroom and a connecting door to a smaller room that would be perfect for Emma. "Mr. Blackwood, this is too much," Maria protested weakly as he settled Emma onto the bed in the smaller room. "It's not nearly enough," Marcus replied. "You need rest, proper meals, and easy access to help if you need it. The staff quarters are isolated, and you'd have to navigate stairs. This is practical, Maria. Let me do this." Maria's eyes filled with tears again, and this time, she didn't try to hide them. "I don't understand why you're being so kind. You're not just anything," Marcus said firmly. "You and Emma are under my protection, and I failed you. I'm trying to make that right." He paused at the door. "Get some rest. I'll have Mrs. Patterson from the main kitchen bring up breakfast in the morning. If you need anything during the night, anything at all, press the call button by the bed. It goes directly to my phone." After ensuring both Maria and Emma were settled, Marcus finally allowed himself to confront what he'd been putting off all evening. He found Victoria in the main sitting room, a glass of wine in her hand, looking remarkably unconcerned. "Finally decided to join me?" she said, her tone light. "Really, Marcus? All that fuss over the hired help. It's not like you to be so dramatic." Marcus stood in the doorway, studying the woman he'd planned to marry. She was beautiful, sophisticated, connected to all the right people. She looked perfect in the designer dress she wore, perfectly coiffed, perfectly composed. And he realized he'd never actually known her at all. Tell me, Victoria, when exactly did you become so cruel? Victoria set down her wine glass with a sharp click, her perfectly painted lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, don't be so melodramatic, Marcus. I was managing your household while you were away, keeping things running smoothly. That's exactly what you asked me to do. I asked you to manage the household, not terrorize my staff and abuse a 3-year-old child. Marcus's voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath the surface. He stepped into the room, and Victoria seemed to shrink slightly despite her bravado. Maria had a broken arm for 2 days, Victoria. 2 days. She could barely stand, and you had her working. You threatened her job if she sought medical attention. Victoria waved a dismissive hand. She was being dramatic. These people always exaggerate their injuries to get out of work. And as for that child, Emma needed to learn that actions have consequences. Her mother made a mess, so she helped clean it up. That's called teaching responsibility. She's 3 years old. Marcus's carefully controlled composure cracked. She's a baby, Victoria. And you had her picking up trash on her hands and knees while you shouted at her. I saw the bruise on her arm. Did you grab her? For the first time, Victoria's confidence wavered. I may have guided her firmly. She was being stubborn, refusing to do as she was told. You hurt a child. Marcus felt sick. You hurt a child in my home, under my roof, while I was away trusting you to take care of things. Victoria stood abruptly, her composure slipping further. Oh, please. Don't act like you care so much about them. They're staff, Marcus. The maid and her bastard child. You've been far too familiar with them anyway. It's inappropriate. Everyone's noticed how you let that little brat interrupt your business calls, how you smile at the maid like she's more than just hired help. I was doing you a favor, maintaining proper boundaries. The accusation hung in the air, and Marcus realized with sudden clarity what had been driving Victoria's cruelty. You are jealous of a single mother trying to make a living and her 3-year-old daughter. I was maintaining standards. Victoria's voice rose. Do you have any idea how it looks to our friends when you let the help's child run around her house like she owns the place? When you know their names, ask about their lives. You're a billionaire, Marcus. You should have people to manage these things so you don't have to bother with them. Marcus stared at her, seeing clearly for perhaps the first time. When did you become so cold, Victoria? Or were you always this way, and I just didn't want to see it? I'm being practical. Something you used to appreciate about me. Victoria's mask was slipping, desperation creeping into her voice. We're getting married in 3 months, Marcus. We have the venue booked, the invitations ordered. This is just pre-wedding stress, making everything seem worse than it is. Once we're married and settled, things will go back to normal. We'll hire a new housekeeper, someone older, without children, and everything will be fine. No, Marcus said simply. It won't, because we're not getting married, Victoria. The words seemed to echo in the suddenly silent room. Victoria's face went white, then red with anger. You can't be serious. You're throwing away our entire future over a maid with a broken arm? I'm ending our engagement because I've seen who you really are, and I don't like what I see. Marcus pulled the ring box from his pocket. He'd retrieved his grandmother's engagement ring from the safe before coming to find Victoria. He held it out to her. This belongs to my family. You're welcome to keep any gifts I've given you, but this returns to me. Victoria didn't take the box. Instead, she laughed, a harsh sound. You're making a huge mistake, Marcus. My father's firm handles half your corporate legal work. My family knows everyone who matters in this city. Do you really think you can just humiliate me like this without consequences? I'm not the one who should be worried about consequences, Marcus said quietly. You injured an employee on my property and coerced her to continue working under threat of termination. That's illegal, Victoria. You physically grabbed and bruised a minor child. That's assault. I have Maria's testimony, Emma's bruise documented by Dr. Chen, and I'm sure security cameras caught more than enough of what happened on the lawn today. Victoria's face drained of color. You wouldn't. I haven't decided yet what I'm going to do with that information, Marcus admitted. Part of me wants to have you arrested. But another part of me thinks the kindest thing for everyone involved is for you to leave quietly. Either way, we're done. I want you out of this house tonight. Tonight? Marcus, be reasonable. I'm being extremely reasonable. I'm giving you a choice. You can pack your belongings and leave with dignity, or I can have security escort you out. But you're leaving either way, and you're never coming back. My lawyers will be in touch about returning any gifts or property that legally belongs to me. Your things will be sent to your apartment. Victoria seemed to deflate, her shoulders slumping. For a moment, Marcus saw something that might have been genuine emotion flicker across her face. Regret, perhaps, or fear. But it passed quickly, replaced by cold anger. You're going to regret this, she said, her voice shaking. When you're alone in this big house with no one but the help for company, you'll remember what you had with me. What you threw away. I already regret plenty, Marcus said. But ending this isn't going to be one of those regrets. Goodbye, Victoria. He waited while she gathered her things, a security guard discreetly present to ensure she actually left. She was gone within the hour, her car's taillights disappearing down the long driveway. Marcus stood in the doorway until he could no longer see them, feeling something complex and unsettled in his chest. Relief, certainly, but also sadness for what he'd thought they had, what he now realized had been largely an illusion built on social compatibility and convenient timing rather than any real depth of feeling. His phone buzzed, a text from the night nurse he'd arranged to stay with Maria and Emma. Mrs. Rodriguez is sleeping soundly. Emma woke briefly asking for you, but settled when I told her you'd see her in the morning. Emma had asked for him. Not her mother. Well, she'd probably asked for Maria first, but also for him. This little girl who called him Mr. Mark and drew him pictures and looked at him like he hung the moon. When had she become so important to him? When had Maria? Marcus thought back over the past 6 months, really examined his interactions with them both. Maria's quiet strength, the way she'd maintained her dignity and warmth even when Victoria had been making her life difficult. The way she'd thank him for small kindnesses like he'd given her the world. Emma's laughter echoing through the halls, her small hand slipping into his on the rare occasions they'd cross paths in the garden, her carefully printed letters under his office door. They'd filled something in his life he hadn't known was empty. And he'd been so busy building his empire, planning a wedding that should have felt more exciting than it did, that he'd almost lost them both. Tomorrow, he'd start making real changes. Not just helping Maria recover, but fundamentally rethinking how he lived his life. But tonight, exhausted and emotionally wrung out, he headed to his room, stopping first to check the security monitor he'd had installed to check on the guest suite where Maria and Emma slept. Through the camera's night vision, he could see Emma sprawled across her bed, one arm flung over her head, peaceful in sleep. In the adjoining room, Maria lay still, finally getting the rest she desperately needed. They were safe. They were cared for. And Marcus silently promised that he'd make sure they always would be. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows of the guest suite when Marcus knocked softly on the door, balancing a tray from the kitchen. Mrs. Patterson, his longtime cook, had outdone herself. Fluffy pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse for Emma, scrambled eggs with herbs, fresh fruit, orange juice, and coffee. "Come in," Maria called, her voice still rough with sleep and pain medication. Marcus entered to find Maria sitting up in bed, her casted arm propped on pillows, and Emma curled against her mother's side, wide awake and staring at the door with those big brown eyes. "Mr. Mark." Emma's face lit up, and she scrambled off the bed to rush toward him, then stopped abruptly, suddenly shy. "Are you still mad about yesterday?" Marcus set the tray on the side table and knelt to her level. "I was never mad at you, sweetheart. Not even a little bit. None of what happened yesterday was your fault. Not even the trash? Miss Victoria said Mama and me made too much work for everyone." "Miss Victoria was wrong about a lot of things," Marcus said gently. "And she won't be saying anything anymore. She doesn't live here now." Emma's eyes widened. "She left? Forever. Forever." To Marcus's surprise, Emma launched herself at him, wrapping her small arms around his neck. "I'm glad," she whispered. "She was mean to Mama. She made Mama cry." Marcus held her close, catching Maria's eyes over Emma's head. Maria was crying again, but this time with relief rather than pain or fear. "I'm sorry," Maria mouthed silently. Marcus shook his head firmly. She had nothing to apologize for. Nothing at all. Breakfast was a surprisingly cheerful affair. Emma was delighted with her Mickey Mouse pancakes and chattered happily about them between bites. Maria ate slowly, her appetite returning now that the pain was managed and the stress had lifted. Marcus found himself relaxing in a way he rarely did, genuinely enjoying their company without the weight of Victoria's disapproval hanging over every interaction. "Mr. Blackwood," Maria said when Emma had finished eating and was coloring at the small table by the window, "I need to know what you expect from me now. When I can return to work, what my duties will be." She paused, struggling with the words. "If you want me to find other employment, I understand. This has all been—" "Stop," Marcus interrupted gently. "Maria, I don't want you to find other employment. I want you to take the time you need to heal properly. And then, when you're ready, I want you to come back to work. But things are going to be different." "Different how?" Marcus had been thinking about this all night. "First, we're going to formalize your employment properly. Written contract, appropriate salary, and I mean appropriate for what you actually do, not what I've been underpaying you. Full benefits, including health insurance that covers both you and Emma. Paid vacation time. Sick days. Everything you should have had from the beginning." Maria's eyes widened. That's very generous." "It's not generous. It's what's right and legal. I should have done it from the start." Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. "Second, you and Emma are moving into the main house permanently. This suite and the connecting room for Emma. No more staff quarters. Those rooms are too small, too isolated, and frankly, beneath what you deserve." "Mr. Blackwood, I can't." "You can and you will." "Third, Emma is welcome everywhere in this house. The garden, the library, the game room, all of it. This is her home too now. I'm going to have the old playroom upstairs converted into a proper space for her, with toys and books appropriate for her age. And I'm enrolling her in the Montessori preschool in town. I know you'd been wanting to get her into a program, but couldn't afford it." Maria was crying openly now. "Why are you doing all this? You're not just anything." Marcus repeated what he'd said the night before. He moved to sit in the chair beside her bed, choosing his next words carefully. "Maria, over the past 6 months, you and Emma have become important to me. More important than I realized until yesterday. Emma's joy, her innocence, the way she sees the world, she's brought light into this house, into my life. And you," he paused, aware of Emma coloring nearby, but too absorbed in her artwork to pay them attention. "You've shown me what real strength looks like. Real kindness. I've been so focused on building wealth that I forgot about building a life worth living." "But what will people think?" Maria asked. "You're a billionaire, and I'm a single mother who cleans houses. The optics." "I don't care about optics anymore," Marcus said firmly. "I care about doing what's right. I care about taking care of people who matter to me. Let people think what they want." Over the next few days, Marcus threw himself into restructuring both his household and his priorities. He hired a proper household manager, a professional woman in her 50s named Janet who had run estates for other wealthy families and understood the appropriate way to treat staff. He brought in contractors to begin the playroom renovation and to make sure all areas of the house were child-safe. He met with lawyers to formalize Maria's employment contract and establish a trust fund for Emma's education. He also dealt with the fallout from Victoria. Her father had indeed tried to make trouble, threatening to pull his legal firm's representation of Blackwood Technologies. Marcus had calmly pointed out that he had documented evidence of Victoria's assault on a minor and workplace coercion, and perhaps it would be best for everyone if they went their separate ways quietly. The threats had stopped immediately. Emma adapted to her new circumstances with the easy resilience of childhood. Within days, she was exploring the house like she owned it, though she always asked politely before entering any room and was respectful of the space. She took particular delight in the library, where Marcus found her one afternoon, carefully turning the pages of an illustrated book about animals. "Mr. Mark, did you know elephants hug with their trunks?" she asked when he sat beside her on the floor. "I didn't know that," he admitted, charmed by her enthusiasm. "Mama says hugs are important. They make people feel loved." Emma looked at him seriously. "Do you feel loved, Mr. Mark?" The question caught him off guard. Did he? His parents had passed away years ago. He had business associates, acquaintances, people who wanted things from him. But people who actually loved him? He'd thought Victoria did, but that had been an illusion. "I'm not sure," he answered honestly. Emma considered this, then very deliberately set down her book and climbed into his lap, wrapping her small arms around him. "Now you do," she announced with satisfaction. Marcus felt his eyes sting with unexpected tears. He hugged her back, this tiny person who'd somehow seen straight into his lonely heart and decided to fill it with her unconditional affection. 6 weeks later, Maria's cast came off. Her arm had healed beautifully, and while she'd need physical therapy to regain full strength, Dr. Chen was pleased with her progress. Marcus had insisted on being there for the cast removal, and Emma had come too, bouncing excitedly in the waiting room. "Freedom." Maria laughed as Dr. Chen cut away the final piece of plaster. She flexed her fingers experimentally, wincing slightly at the stiffness, but grinning through it. "Now remember, take it slow," Dr. Chen cautioned. "No heavy lifting for at least another month. And I mean it, Marcus. You're in charge of making sure she follows orders." "I have experience managing stubborn people," Marcus said, smiling at Maria's indignant expression. The past 6 weeks had been transformative in ways Marcus couldn't have predicted. With Maria recovering and unable to work, he'd found himself spending more time at home, adjusting his schedule to have breakfast and dinner with Maria and Emma. What had started as a desire to make sure they were settling in comfortably had evolved into something he looked forward to each day. Emma's playroom was finished, a magical space with built-in bookshelves, a reading nook, art supplies, and educational toys. But Emma's favorite place remained the library, where she and Marcus had developed an evening ritual. He'd read to her before bed, doing silly voices for different characters that made her giggle until she hiccuped. Maria would often join them, curling up in one of the leather armchairs with her own book, and Marcus found he cherished these quiet evenings more than any high-powered business dinner or social event. Emma had started at Sunshine Montessori Preschool and was thriving. She came home each day bursting with new information and skills to demonstrate. Marcus had found himself rearranging his schedule to pick her up some days, delighting in her excited chatter about her day. The other parents had been surprised at first, a billionaire doing school pickup, but Emma's proud declarations that "Mr. Mark is my almost daddy" soon smoothed over any awkwardness. Maria had grown more relaxed around him as well. The worry lines that had been permanent fixtures on her forehead during those first months had faded. She smiled more, laughed more. They'd had long conversations during her recovery, really getting to know each other beyond the employer-employee dynamic. He'd learned about her childhood in Texas, her family who still lived there, the abusive relationship with Emma's father that had driven her to flee across state lines and start over with nothing. She'd learned about his pressure-filled childhood as the heir to a tech empire, his parents' death in a car accident 5 years ago, his loneliness despite being surrounded by people who wanted things from him. Now, watching Maria flex her newly freed arm and seeing the joy on her face, Marcus realized something that had been building for weeks. He'd been in love with Victoria out of convenience and social expectation. But what he felt when he looked at Maria, this was something entirely different. It was real and deep and terrifying in its intensity. "Can we celebrate?" Emma asked, tugging on Marcus's sleeve. "Mama's all better now. Can we have a party?" "I think that's an excellent idea," Marcus said. "What kind of party should we have?" Emma's face scrunched up in concentration. "A pizza party. With ice cream. And we can watch a movie." "Your wish is my command, princess," Marcus said with a mock bow that made Emma dissolve into giggles. That evening, they did exactly that. Marcus ordered an obscene amount of pizza from Emma's favorite place. They made ice cream sundaes with every topping imaginable, and they settled in the media room to watch Emma's choice. Predictably, a princess movie. Emma sat between them on the large couch, her head resting against Marcus's arm, her legs stretched across Maria's lap. Halfway through the movie, Marcus felt a soft weight against his shoulder. Maria had fallen asleep, exhausted from the excitement of the day and the physical therapy session. Emma was also dozing, her breath evening out into the deep rhythm of sleep. Marcus should have woken them, sent them off to their own rooms. Instead, he carefully reached for the throw blanket on the back of the couch and tucked it around all three of them. He must have dozed off too, because he woke to the credits rolling and the soft glow of early morning light filtering through the curtains. Maria was awake, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "We fell asleep," she whispered, careful not to wake Emma. "We did," Marcus agreed, his voice equally soft. "I should have." "This was nice," Maria interrupted. "Feeling like a family." The word hung in the air between them. Family. Was that what they'd become? Marcus looked down at Emma, still fast asleep and using his leg as a pillow. He thought about the past 6 weeks, the way his entire life had reoriented around these two people. The way coming home had stopped feeling like walking into a museum and started feeling like coming home to something real. "Maria," he began, then stopped, unsure how to put his feelings into words that wouldn't scare her away. "I know," she said softly. "I feel it too. But Marcus, I'm scared. You're you. I'm just. If you say just a maid one more time, I'm going to have to fire you," Marcus said, making her smile despite the tears shining in her eyes. "You're Maria Rodriguez. You're strong and kind, and the best mother I've ever seen. You're someone who faced down poverty and abuse and kept your dignity and your heart intact. You're someone who makes me want to be a better man." "Marcus, I'm not asking you to decide anything right now," Marcus continued. "I know this is complicated. I know there are a lot of factors to consider. But I need you to know that when I look at you, I don't see the maid. I see the woman I'm falling in love with. And when I look at Emma, I don't see the maid's daughter. I see a little girl who's stolen my heart completely. I see a child I'd be honored to help raise, to protect, to love." Maria was crying freely now. What if people say terrible things? What if they say I'm a gold digger, that I'm using you? Let them say whatever they want. I know the truth. You know the truth. And someday, when she's older, Emma will know the truth too. Marcus gently brushed a tear from Maria's cheek. "I spent years building a fortune but living in an empty house. You and Emma showed me what was missing. You showed me what really matters." "I love you too," Maria whispered. "I've been trying not to, telling myself it was inappropriate, that I was being foolish. But I can't help it. You've been so good to us, so kind. Not just after Victoria left, but before too. The way you'd smile at Emma when she left you those drawings. The way you always asked about my day, like you actually cared about the answer. I fell in love with you, and I was terrified of what that meant." Marcus leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. Their lips met in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and felt like coming home. When they pulled apart, Emma was stirring awake. "Are you kissing?" Emma asked, her voice sleepy but curious. "Like in the princess movies?" "Maybe a little bit," Marcus admitted, his face warming. Emma processed this for a moment, then broke into a huge smile. "Does this mean you're going to be my real daddy now? Not just my almost daddy?" Marcus looked at Maria, who nodded through her tears. "If that's okay with you and your mama, that's exactly what I'd like to be." Emma launched herself at him with such enthusiasm that they all nearly tumbled off the couch. "Yes. Yes, yes, yes. I'm going to tell everyone at school that I have the best daddy in the whole world." Over the following months, their unconventional family took shape. Marcus proposed to Maria on Emma's 4th birthday, getting down on one knee in front of all the preschoolers at Emma's birthday party. Emma had insisted she wanted to be there for the proposal, and the resulting chaos of excited 4-year-olds had been worth it for the joy on Maria's face. They were married in a small ceremony in the garden 6 months later. Emma was the flower girl, taking her duties very seriously as she scattered rose petals with careful precision. Marcus's business associates had been surprised by his choice of bride, but the surprise had faded when they saw them together. When they saw the way Maria grounded Marcus, made him laugh, challenged him to think about impact rather than just profit. Marcus had restructured his priorities, stepping back from some business responsibilities to focus on being present for his new family. He still ran Blackwood Technologies, but he no longer lived at the office. He made it to every one of Emma's school events, every milestone, every ordinary Tuesday afternoon that became extraordinary simply because they were together. Emma flourished in ways that brought tears to Maria's eyes. She was confident, joyful, secure in the knowledge that she was loved and valued. She called Marcus Daddy now without the almost, and the word never failed to make his heart swell. 3 years after that day, when Marcus had returned home unexpectedly, they gathered in the very spot where he'd first seen Emma picking up trash, while Victoria shouted at her. Now that lawn was filled with Emma's 6th birthday party, friends from school, neighbors, and most importantly, Maria's family, who'd flown in from Texas. Marcus stood with his arm around Maria, watching Emma play with her cousins and friends, and thought about how different his life could have been. If he'd arrived home an hour later, if he'd ignored what was happening, if he'd chosen to believe Victoria's excuses. "What are you thinking about?" Maria asked, leaning into his side. "About how lucky I am," Marcus said honestly. "About how a little girl picking up trash on a lawn broke down all my walls and showed me what really matters." Maria smiled, that beautiful smile that still took his breath away. "She has a way of doing that, making people see clearly." "She learned it from her mother," Marcus said, pressing a kiss to Maria's temple. Emma spotted them and came running over, her party dress already grass-stained and her hair escaping from its careful braids. "Daddy, come play tag." "You're it." Marcus laughed and chased after her, letting her weave around guests and shriek with delight. As he ran through the garden of his estate, chasing his daughter while his wife laughed at their antics, Marcus reflected on the strange journey that had brought him here. He'd been a billionaire before, but he'd been poor in the ways that truly mattered. Now he was wealthy in love, in family, in purpose. And as Emma jumped into his arms, breathless and giggling, declaring him the best daddy in the world, Marcus knew he'd finally found what he'd been searching for all along. Sometimes the most precious treasures aren't found in boardrooms or bank accounts. Sometimes they're found in a 3-year-old smile, in a mother's strength, in the courage to admit when you've been wrong, and the commitment to do better. Sometimes they're found when you stop building empires and start building a home. And Marcus Blackwood had finally found his way home.